in the US do we have to teach in such an old-fashioned way to the majority of kids? It's definitely hurting the level of tennis in this country. So let's talk about it a little bit. I wrote this top 10 list for an article in New York Tennis Magazine. You can check it out if you want the print edition. I think it's either coming out this month or it came out in the last issue. I think it's due to be published soon. So if you're in the New York area, you can check out this basic list in New York Tennis Magazine, which is a good magazine for the Eastern section. And so the first one, you've heard me talk about it, is with the forehand. And I love to work on the forehand. This is like a Spanish thing in Spain. They're obsessed with developing a forehand weapon, usually with a lot of topspin, unless you're Bautista Agut, maybe. Or very rarely, most of the Spanish players play with really good topspin with a loose arm, and they generate high RPM and a very quick racket. So as the racket's accelerating to the ball, there's a whippiness, and the racket flies through the air very quickly. So there's a quick acceleration of the racket, and it almost looks like a blur. It does look like a blur. And so when I have young kids, I'm thinking down the road, I want a forehand like that. And unfortunately, what I see taught to the majority of young children in this country is the opposite of a blur or a whip. I see and the opposite of loose. I see a lot of stiff, blocked, cramped, tight, locked. You can fill in the adjective that you'd like to use. Swing. So the swing is very tight, and if you look at the musculature of the arm, so if you're hitting the forehand, if you look carefully, you'll see whether there is tension rippling through that arm. I'm talking from the shoulder down to the lower arm to the wrist. Is there a lot of tension there, or are those segments moving with more elasticity? And that, to me, is the number one most important thing when you're building the forehand. We'll talk about a few other aspects too, but you have a little kid in front of you, whether it's a red ball player or an orange ball player or whatever ball you're using. The arm needs to be elastic. So the segments of the arm, you have the wrist, the elbow joint, the shoulder joint. Those joints need to be mobile and supple. There has to be a suppleness to the way the arm is moving, and those joints have to be loose when you swing. It's a little tricky because at impact, those joints there's a firmness that happens. So, but pre-impact and post-impact, there should be a lot of elasticity and looseness. So at right. Biomechanically, as you're getting closer to impact, there is a tensioning that happens in anticipation of the impact, and in order to keep the racket head stable. But in general, I think you guys know what I'm getting at. There needs to be like a looseness in the arm, a looseness in the wrist. The wrist needs to whip, and one of the ways that I found to get that is to not teach. I've talked about this a million times. You guys, if you're one of my students, I know a lot of my students and families are listening to this. I'm preaching to the choir here. You've heard this a lot, but the follow through, the traditional follow through, is killing forehands across this country. The traditional follow through, where you go from low to high, and I know exactly how coaches teach it, and you maybe you step in. We'll talk about the footwork a little next. And you extend a little, and maybe you catch the racket out in front, or you follow through to your ear, or you wrap the follow through around your neck. You basically follow through low to high. You go your swing path low to high, and then you catch the racket. You follow through above to the top of the shoulder, to the neck. It's a disaster. It's a disaster. And it's very rarely taught well with suppleness and elasticity. For some reason, that that cue, that teaching cue, is killing um, the looseness in the arm of so many players. And so I face a daily battle trying to unwork that, to try to unwind the tightness in the players' forehands that I see. It's a daily, weekly battle. Almost every player who comes to me from like a typical club around the country, obviously depends on the place. Very rarely do I see a kid with the arm relaxed with a nice fluidity and and a nice elasticity, and that is a huge issue when you're developing the forehand, because the best forehands are whip-like and the arm is relatively loose. I mentioned that the tension varies in the arm, so as you're coming up to the impact, the arm will stiffen a little pre-impact. But basically, one post-impact, there's also when you wiper and you follow through, there's a lot, the looseness returns again, and in the pre-impact phase there should be a lot of looseness, so you can get that lag and the snap through. It's either called the lag or snap, or like Rick Macy calls it, the flip. There should be a lot of you have to create lag and whip in the arm pre-impact, and then there should be. And let's talk about post-impact of the ball. There should be. I found the best way to try to develop looseness and elasticity in the arm is to go big on the windshield wiper finish, go big on the rotational finish. So that's where you make a big pronation at the end of the post impact, and you rotate your forearm. So there's a big internal shoulder rotation. Rick Macy would call that turning the doorknob. But I say, like, go big on that. You should exaggerate that with young kids. It should be this is radical for coaches who are steeped in traditional methodology, but go big on that. I have a socials friend from Russia. I forgot the dude's name. He's the top coach in Russia, but we exchanged a lot of videos, him and I. And he was a top ATP player as well. And he sent me some amazing videos of the way he teaches the forehand with extreme pronation and shoulder internal rotation. Basically, that's the windshield wipering action post impact, and so much wipering where you rotate the forearm and the shoulder, that the racket is pointing directly down at the end of the backswing, rather than going up to the top of the shoulder. You rotate extreme down. And I agree with that. I think it's brilliant. It's unbelievable. I love that. It's so different, and the opposite of what most coaches learn here in the U.S., where we create so much stiffness and we create a locked arm. This is like a big thing for me, the forehand, and I'm going to spend, I think, a little more time on this subject, because it's the forehand, as Tony Nadal says, the most important shot in the game. You might disagree with Uncle Tony. I might disagree a little bit too, because I know you're going to say serve and return. But the forehand now is if it's not the most important, it is the primary weapon of tennis. And if we have thousands and thousands of players around this country learning rudimentary forehands, because they're being taught in a way that creates a locked arm, a stiff arm. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing that? And one of the ways that I found is to create elasticity and suppleness in the arm is to do this extreme wipering post impact. It helps a lot. The other thing you can do is you can just focus on where the follow through goes. If you can follow through lower, so the swing path will go usually high, low, rises up to the impact, then lifts and extends, and then you go, instead of lifting and extending and locking it into the shoulder or the ear, or where you wrap to your neck. At the end, you go up and then over and then down, and try to finish with the racket dangling low. So the racket there should be like the absence of tension at the end of the forehand stroke. And if you go and check most American kids, check their tension level. I wish there was a meter, some way to measure it. But just go and feel the arm at the end. And that thing is so friggin' tight for 90% of the kids that I see. They follow through, and at the end of the swing, there's so much tension in that arm, and they're gripping the racket very tightly, and they're forcing the weight of the racket up high at the end. I just think it's a disaster, and I see it 9 out of 10 kids probably, And once in a while, I get a kid from like a special, maybe from a top academy, or they had a coach who was a very high level coach. And they do it. They're very elastic, and their forehand looks to me like down the road their forehand could become a tremendous weapon. So this is a complex topic, but I tried to get into some of the little bit of the nitty gritty for those of you who like technique. I hope I didn't go too far into the weeds where I lost you guys, but I mean, I could probably do. I think I've done a whole show just on this topic, but it's just, I keep reiterating it because it's bothering me now. This is years later and nothing is changing. Like all the kids play the same forehand. I don't know if it's coming. It must be coming from maybe the red, orange, green curriculums. Thank you, red, orange. Whoever wrote the red, orange, green manual for coaches. Thank you very much. You create a lot of business for me. I appreciate it. But you are not helping those kids become the best they can be. I'll tell you that.